everybody, and welcome back. It's Regan Yan from Digital Alchemy, and I'm here again with Justin Theng from SaaS. And today we're going to talk about this really interesting topic, I think, because it's not, it's Justin. It was just this topic was Justin's idea, and it wasn't something that I'd really thought about in terms of customer analytics. But as we get into it, it'll make a lot of sense to you, and I think it's really interesting. So today we're going to talk about how customer analytics empowers culture.
That's right. This came about, I'm a practitioner as well as what people, I guess, would call an advisor, right? We go out there and we advise executives, but at the same time, I'm also a practitioner. And I found myself getting obsessed with fine-tuning the customer experience. So what that looks like is I'm looking at data and I'm poring over what's working and what's not and how to make it better and trying to preempt what people want. One of the most powerful tools that exists out there, Regan, is this website personalization stuff. There aren't many that do it. We obviously do it, but there aren't many that do it. And what it is it looks at how you've behaved in the past as a user, what you've been interested in, and reconfigures the entire website, text, images, everything, to show you only what's relevant and remove the rest of the noise. And what you'll find is that when your team starts building on this trust in data, trust in customer analytics, and obsessing over what's working, what's not, how do we be better? And that's the key thing, is how do we be better iteratively? That's when you find that your customer experience really just goes next level exponentially, because you're now doing this every day over time. I mean, this isn't my idea, but the idea of culture, how to create culture, this not mine, but the formula is values times action equals culture. I don't know who came up with it, but I think it's apt, because the values that we've been speaking about in previously, Regan, is this curiosity, creativity, and courtesy. So those are the values. Now, if you apply those three over time and repeat over time, what you'll end up with is a culture of world-class CX.
And I think the key to that is time. Is repetition over time. I mean, we'll talk about the other attributes, but it's this attribute of repetition over time that I find really interesting, because marketing as a discipline comes from a campaign background, right? Comes from a campaign history. So yes. Marketing's history has been around the development of campaigns, which by definition are time bound and different every time.
Yes, and one to many.
And one to many. Whereas what we're talking about here is actually repetition over time and consistency over time. So we talk about we always talk about the little old lady in provincial France walking into the butcher, right?
Yes, that's our favorite.
That's our favorite go-to analogy, right? But that's repetition over time. That happens.
Yes,
every
exactly.
week, right? And that's what the data allows us to do. It allows us to be consistent and repetitious over time with those three values.
Yeah, and for the customer, what happens is they go from liking your brand to loving your brand, right? They go from like to love, and that should be the goal of customer experience leaders everywhere. It's how do we move people from like to love? I mean, obviously, if they don't like you, then fix that. That's pretty important.
Well, one way for people not to like you is to be repetitious with exactly the same thing.
Yes, exactly. One way for people to not like you is to be repetitious with exactly the same thing.
Right. So when we talk about repetition, we're not talking about repetition with the same thing. We're talking about repetition of those three values.
We should make a podcast like that just to prove a point, Regan, where we just repeat ourselves over and over and over again. But some people listening might think that's all a little too fluffy. So break it down for us, Regan. What are the actual business outcomes of a culture that is built around customer experience?
So, look, it might sound fluffy to some people, but it's absolutely not fluffy at all, right? I mean, one of the things that we know, right, and there's a mountain of statistics and numbers around this, is that engagement drives sales, right? And one of the things that we do is that we measure engagement, for our clients. And what we seek to do is that we seek to measure a level of engagement with probability of buying something. Simple as that. So if your engagement is level 1, what's your probability of buying, of responding to an offer? If your engagement is level 2, what increase in probability of purchase comes from that? So it sounds fluffy, but we can put numbers around this now because we can measure your engagement. And so we can now, through this, we know that we can increase, your probability to purchase. We know that we can reduce your probability to leave. We know that we can increase your likelihood to be an advocate.
Nice. Or decrease your likelihood to be a detractor.
Yeah.
And then you've got costs coming down. You've got, I think it was McKinsey. Yeah, it was McKinsey research that said the CX leaders, the businesses who are CX leaders, will typically see within 2 to 3 years a 5 to 10% increase in revenue and a 10 to 25% reduction in cost. That's a lot of fat in the middle, just from putting your customer in the center, which we all say we do, but do we really?
No.
Not always. Because why? Because it's a dichotomy. Sometimes you have to choose between being efficient and providing great customer experience, right? Well, sometimes you can cut cost and cut the customer out in that cost, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I know I'm generalizing, but there's generally some of the challenges we face, right?
Well, I think there's a general assumption that that high levels of customer service are more expensive than low levels of customer service. And when I did my MBA 30 years ago, we studied Porter, right? And Michael Porter, back in the late 80s, wrote the seminal book called Competitive Advantage. And he basically told organizations that you can go down a number of different routes, but you can be sort of high service or low cost, but you can't be both.
Yeah. This whole idea of profit first, not the new kind of profit first, but profit over everything else, came about in this like the 1800s with like boards and shareholders and stuff, doesn't it? But Zappos is a perfect modern example of how customer first actually makes you very profitable.
Right, and I think, but that's the thing that new companies like Zappos and to some extent even Amazon, it's easier, right? I mean, if you look at all of these new startups, they're designed from the customer backwards. They actually start. I mean, if you go into any of these sort of startups, they think about what are we going, what's the customer proposition, and how are we going to, whereas legacy organizations were built from products, from a Model T Ford, from so their whole organizational infrastructure is built around product profitability optimization, and it's very, very difficult for them to migrate to a deep customer-centric organization, because it's not just their products and their organization structure, it's their systems. All of their systems report and manage product profitability. And so it is very difficult for legacy organizations to transition into truly customer-centric organizations. And it's why all of the best customer-centric organizations are all startups over the last 10 years.
Yeah, and I think once there's a way of viewing, and just time conscious, but final thought, the way that they view marketing is something that we can all learn from, right? And the way that you view marketing is, the traditional way of viewing marketing is I have a product and find a way to sell it. Whereas these customer-centric organizations use marketing as a way of finding out, generating data, and a way of finding out,
great,
what is it that our customers want? And then we adapt, we tweak. Great product ideas can come out of data, as opposed to the other way around, where it's like, well, here's the product, off you go, sell it.
Right. You know, I've got a, you know, here's a car, it's black, you know, you can have it in any color you like as long as it's black.
As long as it's black, you know, compare that to, like, let's say an Uber, which is like, well, this is the problem we solve, and we'll figure out, you know, should it be subscription, or maybe we can do food. Maybe people actually want food delivery, and it just adapts and evolves over time. I know I'm simplifying, but there is that is food for thought at very least.
Very much so. Very much so.
Regan, this is something that you and I can talk about all day. So if anyone would like to talk about it for at least a portion of a day, give Regan and I a call. Yeah, we would love to get in touch. Right. Regan, this is it for us. Any final words? It sounds so final. Last words. No, we're good.
Thanks everyone. Talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.